Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little, and today I'm going to be going over one of the hand histories of one of the people who have went through the Jonathan Little Secrets course. And I'm not too sure what's going to happen in this game, although hopefully everything will be good and I won't see too many mistakes at least. This is an 180 person sit and go. I'm not quite too sure of the buy-in, although I believe it's probably something like $10. Um, Very first hand we have a raise and a push. Whenever you see someone do this push very early in the game, it's usually not a great hand, and because of that you can call off pretty light. Although, when I say pretty light, I mean something like I'd probably call with ace queen and maybe nine, maybe probably like jacks or tens or higher, something like that. So, not too incredibly light, but sort of light. We see he pushes with king eight, or calls off with king eight here, which is absolutely terrible, and um, the ace queen shove I think is pretty bad as well. Definitely not how you need to go about playing your hands. Also, Free Poker Vid is the player who we are watching, obviously. Right here, there's a limp under the gun, and Free Poker Vid decides to raise to 80. And I think that's pretty good. I probably would have made it about 100 or 120 because you're going to be out of position throughout the hand. Or you could also limp sometimes, although in the low stakes games, it's better to go ahead and get a lot of money in pre-flop. We flop the nut flush draw here, and I think it's definitely best to go ahead and bet out. Probably something like 160. And so Free Poker Vid bets 120, which is half pot. And I think the problem betting half pot is that you can get called a decent amount, and whenever you get called, there's not going to be too many great turns. So I like betting a little bit more. And also, if you bet more, say you bet 160 and someone makes it 400, you can easily push in on top of them. Whereas if they make it, actually, that's not really true. If they make it 300 or 360 here, you can still push on top of them. So I guess the reason I like betting a little bit more is it just gives me a little bit more fold equity, so you win the pot a little higher percentage of the time. Everyone folded, and we picked up the pot though. As you can see, this guy here is just getting the money in every hand. And whenever you see someone at your table like this, it's a pretty profitable situation. Right here, you raise with king queen, which I think is good. I don't think you should really fold there, and I don't think limping's good either. Whenever you get a bad flop like this, three-handed, I think it's definitely best to just check fold because one of your opponents probably has some part of this, and you're usually not going to get them to fold. So Free Poker Vid did check fold there, so that's very good. Pick up the aces and raise again, which is very good. You bet about 3/4 pot on the flop, which I think is fine. I think it's a good size bet. The turn's a jack, which is basically a blank, and I think you definitely need to bet again. You bet 340, which I think is a good size bet if you're planning on shoving the river. And because see, if you bet 340 and he calls, there's going to be around 1,000 chips in the pot, and then you can shove the river. You don't really have to be too worried your opponent has a set here because they probably would have raised you either on the flop or the turn, or on the flop. And if they go all in on the turn here, I think you still just have to call because aces are too good. Your opponent just calls, and now you make top set. And really, that doesn't change our hand's value. Besides, now we know we have the nuts. And the ace could scare our opponent off this hand, so betting small may be correct. Although, whenever you see someone call you down on the flop and the turn, they probably have something they don't really plan on folding. So, I think the best play here is to shove. I don't really like checking here, and I think betting somewhere in the middle is probably a close second place to shoving. Because, most likely our opponent has something like either a six or maybe a pair between something like jack, between like sevens or tens. And I'm not really sure they'll call a shove here. So I guess assuming they have that sort of range, which makes sense, I think betting smaller might actually be best. So maybe bet around 400 or 500. And if our opponent has a draw, if you bet 500, they may decide to go all in on top of you. So Free Poker Vid does bet 400, which I think is good now that I thought it out. And we get called by, let's see, nines. I think this is a pretty awful call by nines. Whenever your opponent bets the flop and the turn here, I think you just kind of have to fold or go all in, and you don't really want to call down, especially when the ace comes. Right here, there's a raise and a call. I don't really like calling here with the 9-8 offsuit. I'd probably just fold in this spot. because you're going to be out of position throughout the hand, and it's going to be pretty tricky to play. Right here when our opponent bets half pot, this is one of the reasons you don't really want to be calling here with hands like 9-8, because, now what do? We actually hit what we wanted to hit, and now we don't really know if we have the best hand or not, and because of that, I just try to avoid these situations altogether. However, this feels kind of like I'm not sure what this bet means. This is, again, it's one of the problems. You can put yourself in tricky situations. I think you either need to check shove here or check fold. I don't really think check calling is good. And Free Poker Vid decided to fold, and I can't really blame him for that. Right here with Jack 2 offsuit, I think you just need to fold. And you call here. And, while the odds do look very good, you're getting 7-1 to call right here. You're really not going to win that high of a percentage of the time. The only time you're going to win a pot is when it comes maybe Jack XX, and none of your opponents have a Jack as well. So you're kind of setting yourself up for failure here by calling. And now that we flop a Jack and you lead out, I'm kind of curious what you planned on doing if someone raised you. Like if Wizards raised, you'd obviously call off. But what if one of these other guys here made it, 260 or 270? That puts you in a pretty tricky spot where there isn't really a clear-cut answer as to what to do. And I guess you'd have to fold, but it puts you in a pretty bad spot. So again, this is one of the reasons why I try to stay out of the way with hands like this. This is a rather long hand history review, so I'm going to be skipping over a lot of the hands that we are not involved in. I like the fold of the ace-6 to the min raise. 8-4, we're of course folding. Right here with ace-9, notice the blinds went up to 25-50, and this player has min raised again. Whenever you see someone min raise for the first time, you kind of need to assume that it's a strong hand, but if you see them doing it constantly, it's probably just their standard raise size, and because of that, you need to not give it nearly as much credit. So, right here, I still don't think ace-9 is good enough to actually play, but just pay attention to raise sizes like that of your opponents. Right here, we just check with the... What happened here? I'm sorry, there was a raise to 150, and we have to fold the king-7, of course. Right here, I really hate Wizards all in. This is very, very bad. There's a raise under the gun, which probably means a pretty strong hand, and then this player, who, we've seen spew around a bit, decides to re-raise. And whenever you have sixes, you want to make sure you have a lot of fold equity. And right here, he's Arnie, whatever his name is, only has to call another 700 chips into a pot of 2,000. So he's definitely going to call. So Wizards has no fold equity. And because of that, I think you definitely just have to fold the sixes. And he gets in against eights and doesn't get lucky. So notice now the blinds went up to 50, 100. And once the blinds get to this level, it's going to be a lot more of a push-fold game. And that's how it's going to be for the rest of the tournament. And notice we're only about 20 hands into this game, and we're already into the push-fold state. So that's kind of how these games work. And that, you either get chips early or you don't. And if you don't, you only have 1 or 2 hands that you can lose. And if you do get chips early, then you can lose a few hands. So we get moved to a new table. And right here, you decide to raise with 7-8 suited to 450. And I don't really like this play at all because it opens yourself up to get pushed on by all these players. And when you do get pushed on, you're going to fold. And on top of that, you don't really have a very good hand. So I either like a fold or raise to maybe 350 here. Just a small enough raise to where the only person who really has a great repushing stack is this Craves guy. So, I don't really like this raise here, for the reasons I just said. You get a pretty bad flop, and, again, if the pot was smaller, say the pot had only 700 chips in it, you could bet maybe 400 chips here and then fold to a shove, but now that the pot's so big, you don't really have any good options. So by raising too much pre-flop, you kind of handicapped yourself, or, you handcuffed yourself post-flop. You know, right here, if I was in this spot, I guess I'd continuation bet to around 600, but I really wouldn't like it. So you check fold, and I'm not really a fan of check folding ever, but you kind of force yourself into that situation. So always make sure you're paying attention to your stack size, and make sure you'll be able to make a continuation bet post flop. So right here with the kings, someone raises, and I think pushing's the only real play. And you do push, so that's very good. And you get it in against your opponent, and they're almost drawing dead. It's always nice.